I think this presentation has been actually kind of fit in the right moment, right? Right after, right? A very engaging, right? I mean, conversation, right? I mean, that you saw, right? As a round table, right? I mean, among some of the key, right? I mean, say players in the DevOps space, right? And I would actually kind of really need to thank them, because I think they are making my job much more easier, right? So with that, right? We'll actually kind of get inside. So what is all about this CALMS, right? I mean, so this is actually the underlying foundation, right, of the DevOps principles, right? I mean, C stands for culture, A stands for automation, L for lean, M for measurement, and S for sharing. I've actually kind of used a pentagon to kind of really represent this across, right? And I actually kind of really did this, right, for a purpose. I could have actually made it much more circular. You see, right, what is on the top, right, culture, C, right? I mean, what to say, that's actually your summit, right? I mean, what to say, that's your fulcrum point. Anything that you want to kind of really move ahead, right, that's going to be, I mean, what to say, the key ingredient, right? And automation and sharing, right, they are going to give you a structure, right, so that you can actually kind of really get to a summit, right? And you see lean and, right, I mean, couple that with measurement, they are actually going to form the foundation of how your DevOps journey is going to be structured, right? So you have to see this, right, I mean, I would say in terms of, right, the way in which, right, you are getting fundamentally right, I mean, building your base on top of it, creating structures, right, and then probably, I mean, I would say going ahead and probably climbing the summit, right, to kind of reach the goal or the state of nirvana, right, with respect to DevOps, right? I will also tell you, right, why I use the word nirvana, right? I mean, notice when I actually kind of really move ahead, right, in the slides. The point of focus, right, I mean, that's going to be here is on measurement, right? Because that's going to be one of the foundations, right? I mean, which is going to be combined with lean to kind of really create a strong, right, element of foundation based on which, right, you can build a large base, right, which can actually kind of elevate you, right, and probably move up ahead, right, against all the odd forces that is actually going to pull it down, right? Okay, so when we are actually kind of trying to do that, right, I would actually want to put in context, right, the golden circle, right? How many of you have seen this golden circle? Okay, so this is actually, I mean, called as the golden circle, right? This is actually from a famous, right, leader called Simon Sinek, right? He has actually written a famous book called Start with Why, right, where he describes in detail about, right, what actually is the magic behind this golden circle. Right. So the first thing, right, is actually kind of start with from inside, right? So you actually kind of have why, right? So why actually always need to be met with a purpose, right? So why you do what you do, right? It's more important than what you do, because otherwise, right, what you do is not going to hold any value, or it is not going to matter, right? Then you have how. How is going to be about, right? I mean, what you are going to do, right? You are trying to kind of really, I mean, sketch out, right? I mean, how you are going to kind of really approach that, right? And then you have what you do. What you do is actually what matters across, but that's should not be your first priority, right? So that should be, I mean, what to say, the last priority. So when you actually kind of really lay this down, right? I mean, what to say, this is actually going to enable you to kind of approach things with a purposeful mission making, right? That way, right, you will be able to kind of have the motivation to fight all odds. You will actually kind of have alignment, right, across structures, across, I mean, what is the kind of boundaries, because you are actually kind of really working against a purpose, right? Not what you are actually really trying to do, right? So we'll start with, right, exploring, right, approaching this measurement and measurement strategy around DevOps with the why. Okay. So you see here a picture, right, of cars and vehicles that are actually kind of moving on the road, right? So this has been put here as a metaphor to kind of really hold, right? I mean, what are we trying to kind of really measure from these cars? You actually have a dashboard, right, which actually kind of shows, right? I mean, fuel indicator, right? I mean, speed, right? I mean, the throttling RPM, right? I mean, the the temperature of your engines, it shows everything, right? What do you use that for? It is momentarily. You do that, look at it, right, for that moment, right? Beyond that moment, right, that serves no purpose, right? Which means, right, this measurement, right, is actually, the way in which you look at it, right, this way, right, is not going to kind of solve any purpose if you are going to really put measurement indicators against it. You are going to stare and go, right, that's not actually, how you should actually kind of lay out your measurement strategy. Measurement strategy should be highly intertwined towards your purpose. It should enable you to daily, right, show you, right, the way to go towards your purpose, right? Otherwise, that's not going to hold any forte, right? And you can tell that, right, I did DevOps, right, I did actually measurement strategy, nothing worked. Because it will not work, because your purpose is not clear, right? Your purpose is not what you do. Your purpose is more than that, right? That's when it actually kind of really matters, and that's when it actually kind of really meets, right, the high-end goal, right, of achieving, right, success. Right, now let us look at this one, right? So it's again, right, automobiles, right? Here it is actually kind of a reference metaphor for, right, what you measure from all these things, right? How do they kind of really use it, right? How do they really, kind of really look at it? They are actually kind of riding for a purpose, right? Of completing, right, all the laps and actually kind of really coming up, right, right at the final lap, right, and cross the checkered flag, right, as it actually kind of really waves through, right? Your measurement strategy should all be intertwined, right, to kind of make sure that, right, that thing is going to be serving, right, what you are actually kind of really trying to accomplish. And we will actually kind of really, get one level deep into it, right, moving between the metaphors that we have laid out across. So this is actually what I explained, right? Whereas this is what actually, is actually part of, the second metaphor, right? You actually have a live wired feedback system that is right in front of the driver who is actually driving through, right? And a team of people who is actually kind of doing a continuous monitoring of everything that matters, right, towards the value, which is actually, winning that particular final lap, winning through that particular final lap, and give constant feedback, right, which will lead to continuous improvement, right? So the way in which we lay your measurement strategy should be in such a way that it's actually kind of highly layered, because you are going to have a lot of metrics. So you will actually kind of get yourself lost, right, into the maze of matrices, and probably targeting and tracking them across, right, without any purpose. Right, and then you actually kind of have, right, something that you want to kind of really accomplish, right, and the leaders here, right, talked about a lot of it, right, time to market, right, kind of really, number of deliveries, number of deployments that you do, right, the agility that you actually have in your delivery mechanism, deployment mechanism, and so forth, right. So everything should finally meet a purpose. Otherwise, even if you have a very well built Jenkins pipeline and nothing is actually flowing into it, it's not going to be of any use. Right, and you can tell that, right, hey, I had a very good, DevOps setup, right, but nothing worked. Because, there was no purpose for it, right? So, that's the most important thing, right, that we actually need to kind of understand, right, when we actually kind of cross this across. And to kind of overlay context, right, to kind of what we talked, right, and I think, one of the lady also actually asked, right, what are the metrics that actually kind of would be of higher level interest to measure, right? You will actually kind of see a lot of that, right, answers coming through, right, this slide, starting with this one. Okay, so this is actually the DORA survey, right? I think if anyone actually attended the first session, right, for the day, right, I think the gentleman from JFrog, right, touched upon it, right, and actually kind of really talked about, right, something called State of DevOps report, right, from an organization called DORA. Right, as the DevOps operations and research, right, it's a DevOps organization and a research group, which is actually now bought over by Google, right? It was an independent entity, which was actually kind of having contributions from Jenkins, Jim Willis, right, and all the mavens of the DevOps world, right? So I want to kind of really, have the group over here, right, note two things, right? One is actually a comparison between 2018 and 19, right, what has been laid out across, right? And I mean, what to say, a snippet from 2019 report of how elite performers are actually kind of really, right, operating their DevOps, right? Because we want to talk about the summit, right? Because I mean, that seems to be the highest, I mean, tallest summit that has been actually kind of conquered, right? I mean, what to say, in this human civilization at this point of time, right? So you see here, the bigger difference that you will need to note here is you have low performers, medium performers, high performers. The bubble has actually grown up, shortened. Everything is actually, I mean, something that will actually prominent show. One thing I want, I mean, the group to take away is, right, I mean, earlier you had an embedded group called Elite. Now it has actually kind of, it has been carved out separately as elite performers. And see the jump right in the elite performers, right, bubble across, right, as it actually kind of really moved across. This is the classic, right, I mean, thing that, right, the industry has started to cross the chasm of DevOps, right? Now it's time to kind of really wake up and probably, I mean, what to say, kind of put our shoes, right, I mean, what to say, and gear up and probably be ready to run. Otherwise, right, I mean, what to say, the disruptions that are going to come through, right, it cannot be anticipated at all, right? It will actually kind of come through and go away before even we actually kind of really react, right? So now to the second one, right? I mean, you see the top 4 metrics that's actually kind of present over there, right? You are actually kind of frequent code deployments, right? Which also, right, undercovers, right, I mean, internally within itself, right, I mean, what to say, the time you take to deploy, which is the lead time from commit to deploy, right? And then you actually kind of have, right, I mean, your change failure rate, right? So when you do these deployments, right, how many of these actually kind of fail, right? So that you actually have to do some work to kind of really, I mean, what to say, handle the situation. And the last one is, right, I mean, what to say, how are you actually handling incidents, right? How incidents, right, are not really incidents for you, right? To what extent you have actually kind of firmed up, right, I mean, what to say, your applications, services, right, I mean, infrastructure that runs on top of it, right? How you have actually kind of bootstrapped and kind of wired up all these things across, right, to kind of really create an environment where you will be able to kind of operate with zero downtime, if I can say so, right? So all these things really actually kind of get factored in the last one, right? And you can see that, right, the first one is about, I mean, what to say, throughput, right, your capability of delivery. The second one is actually about stability, the quality with which actually, I mean, what to say, the delivery is really happening, right? So these are the 4 indicators, right, I mean, that serve on the top of the circle, right? And you will see that a lot of, I mean, what to say, indicators that are actually hanging on the bottom of the circle. Logically speaking, these are actually kind of your whys, but you will actually also need to care for your whats and how, I mean, the whats place against these whys. Fair enough? Okay, so now we'll move to the how part of it, right? So we can actually create, right, I mean, what to say, a kind of, right, a way in which we can work to kind of really conquer this through, right? And I will actually kind of invite and actually have Hari on the stage, right, to kind of really go over this part, right, of explaining, right, I mean, what to say, what can be done, right, in the how part.
Thanks, Pala. Good evening, everyone. So most of the question came here, like how we can measure the DevOps or DevOps maturity, how can we measure it? So the solution is whatever we are trying out and we have been using for the past 2 years is Hygia. Hygia is an open source solution created by Capital One that provides us a single configurable DevOps dashboard which enables us to get the full visualization of our entire delivery pipeline. So it also provides insight about various sectors. I like to mention few like DevOps maturity, pipeline speed, as well as automated CI/CD, tracking quality, and rising the best practices. So these are the insights, and this solution is developed and with a partnership of industry players such as Verizon, Walmart, and American Airlines. They started a consortium for this, as well as we Verizon contributed collectors and widgets towards Hygia, and we are also the key contributor towards executive dashboard, which is the latest version of Hygia 3.0. So Hygia appears in 2 self-contained dashboards, one for DevOps engineers and one for executives. The one for DevOps engineer comes in 2 flavors, one with the team board and another with the asset focus, the asset board, which is called as product board. The team board focus on accumulating the metrics from different DevOps tools and presenting from inception to the deployment in the production. So various metrics which we can get from the DevOps tools in a single view, it will be represented. And whereas asset focus, the product focus is a cumulative of all the microservices or modules in your application in a single view. That will show the overall 90-day pipeline health, as well as commit moving from between different stages. For every commit, there will be different stages, right? Once we commit it, it will be going to the DIT and then SIT, system integrated testing, and then user assurance testing. And then it will move to the pre-production environment, and then it will reach the production. So the entire pipeline can be achieved with the help of this asset focus, the product dashboard. So I'll explain in detail about the product dashboard, like what all the measures we can get out of the product dashboard. So here is one of the example. As I said, the code waiting stages are captured here. So at each different stages, the code commits, the green dots and red dots are the code commits. The code commits are waiting to move to the next consecutive stages. So whatever that here, if you see 3 minutes, 45 minutes are different wait time in different stages. So every commits on an average 3 minutes wait in the commit stage, and on an average 45 minutes it waits in the build stage. So it gives a different perspective of like the waiting duration of each stages. So this will clearly show the product teams like where the waiting time is more. It also amplifies the overall waiting time, and it provides opportunity to reduce the waiting time and get the pipeline speed much faster. So that is the overall view of this. And if you notice, you'll be wondering like what this green dots and red dot shows. So actually, we want the code commit to flow without any interruption. Like whatever I commit the code, it should pass all the stages and get to production as immediately as possible. If a particular commit stagnant in a particular place, we are considering that as a red commit. So whatever the calculation we made is like 2 standard deviation of the wait time of the each stages. So that we indicated as a red blocks, and the green blocks are whichever passed within the less than 2 standard deviation. And the last chart which shows the pipeline of quality trends, which includes the unit test case trend for us, as well as functional test and violations available in the code, and overall build fixed rate. So when the build is failed and when it has been fixed, that build fixed state is also available as a part of your pipeline quality trends. The next one, which I said for executives, this is the latest version of Hydra 3.0. This enables senior leadership of your organization to get the understanding of DevOps state of maturity and analyze the risk and compliance across different portfolio products. So, and also each card represents key performance indicators of quality aggregated across the portfolio. And this key metrics enables them leverage to set precise on goals on how to improve the certain elements like DevOps maturity or maintaining the consistency across the organization that can be achieved with the help of this executive dashboard. I'll take one card in example, and how the preview looks, I'll explain it. So this is one of the card which shows the open source violations available for a particular executive. And here each metric will have the metric name like open source violations, and it will have the count, how many number of violations at present available, and what is this metric meant, and what is the source for it. That will be available in what's this, and the segment, the 4th segment, which includes how many blockers, criticals, major violations available, and 5th and 6th will provide the detailed information of like from which product has more open source violations. There some improvement need to be done. So that can be, we can able to get that here. And the very last one is the trending one. So trend indicates like how the particular product or overall portfolio works for him. Like under open source violations, how the trend goes. If it keeps on increasing for the last 90-day trend, it will be indicated in a red arrow with up arrow as indicating red, which means some improvement needs to be done against this metric. If it is the open source violations, they decreased over the trend, then it will be a green arrow with a downsized one. So apart from this, we in executive dashboard we have different views, which I said on the details, like the trend for a particular product as well as module can be we can able to get, and which module contributed how many number of violations that can be achieved over there. And this one will give the overall enterprise-wide products and overall scorecard for them, like what is the open source violations for the field product. So that's how we can able to get it over here. And this makes enterprise-wide standards for DevOps maturity values, as well as driving usage of standard best practices across the organization. And even if the application teams get a view about it, like some metrics which they see, like, yeah, it's moving high over there, then what is the pattern they are using? What is the best approach they are using? They can communicate within the team or within other application team and collaborate and get the new patterns, and they can apply the same in their product as well. So that is the focus of this view. Yeah, so here are the key performance indicators which measures the efficiency and speed. I want to mention few here, like the velocity. Velocity is like the number of days for a story or a story point to move to production. So that we compute, as well as the MTTR, which we discussed, like time to recover from save ones or save two outages. And I want to mention the important one, the say-do. How many number of stories I'm committing for a sprint and how much I'm completing it. So that we can able to get from the say-do ratio.
Yeah, so few other things in context, right, that we discussed is actually, what to say, related to the lagging and the leading indicators, right? You can see, right, which is work in progress, right? So the amount of work that the team is engaged with at any point of time, right? So that is actually, what to say, present over there, and it will also have, right, for how long, what to say, that actually kind of really happens, right? So you will actually kind of be able to kind of visually see that across. And we will actually also see, right, how these things, right, are going to kind of really get related when we actually get into the what game.
So this is a conceptual architecture of Hygia, how it works. Like Hygia is a plugin based architecture. So whatever the DevOps tools available, we can have a collector or a publisher to pull the information or push the information towards Hygia. So these are the various DevOps tools at present we are supporting. I'll show the extensive list of collectors in the next slide. And these are the publisher or collector is a API library, which is a framework which is extensible. You can plug into any of the tools you are using for DevOps world. And the next layer is the DB layer, which we use as MongoDB. And the third one is the API layer, which is a Spring Boot application, which aggregates all the metrics and visually present in the UI layer, which is the Angular component at present. Yeah, so these are the various DevOps tools at present supported by Hygia, and we have the plugin or collector support as of now. So whatever the, apart from if you are using for planning, if you are using another tool, maybe GitLab if you are using, then it is easy to utilize the collector which is already present over there. Those are just API libraries which you need to extend imported with the APIs exposed by GitLab. So that is the way we can use collector or plugin. So this is the open source, as you all know. Like these are the source codes available for team board as well as the product board, which I said, and as well as the executive board. And we want to every one of us to contribute towards it. So we have the contribution guidelines for the same, as well as the documentation is also available over here. Yeah, I'll give it to Bala to share about the what next.
Yeah, thanks, Hari. So, and one more point what I want to add is, right, it is Apache license, right? So it's the most freedom-oriented, right, licensing model, right? That anyone can actually kind of embrace, right, without any fear, right? And remember, right, as Hari was mentioning in the first slide, this is actually, at this point, right, we don't have a lot of open source contributors, individual contributors from the market, right? We are actually kind of expecting this, right, this as a starting point to kind of really drive this, right, message and journey forward, right, in India ahead, right? But we actually have, right, say sizable amount of, right, contributors who are actually kind of being committed, right, from all these enterprises that we talked about, right? Capital One, Verizon, Walmart, American Airlines, and we also recently, right, I mean, what is a kind of closed down Adobe, who is actually also, right, I mean, entering into the bad bank, right? And this is actually kind of run by Hygia Consortium, which actually kind of publishes the contribution guidelines, and they actually kind of work with the larger contribution groups to create roadmaps, right? And I mean, what to say, also look at requests, right, from I mean, what to say, the teams that are using these applications, and define, I mean, what to say, roadmap and the path ahead for that across. Okay, so now I think we actually kind of had an introduction regarding, right, or I'll rephrase it, right? We actually kind of talked about the why part of it. Now we have, right, I mean, something to chew, right? So now, I mean, we will need to kind of look at, right, how to digest that and get energy out of it, right? So we actually derive the benefit of eating, right? With that in context, right, I'm again going to rely upon, right, I mean, one of the important principles, right, I mean, that form the foundation of DevOps, which are the 3 V's, right? This was introduced by John Willis and Jenna Kim, right, in the Phoenix project book, right, as well as, right, I mean, endorsed and detailed a lot, right, in the DevOps handbook, right, but that actually they also wrote with, I mean, few other, I mean, DevOps leaders. So what does this state, right? I mean, you actually kind of talk about 3 ways over here, right, but it is actually kind of really, right, I mean, very fundamental, right? I mean, there is nothing scientific about all these things. I would actually probably put it under the terminology of common sense, right? First way, first make the workflow, right? So all you need to set up is, right, I mean, what to say, when you actually have, right, I mean, what to say, your pipeline, right, and you actually kind of really, I mean, what to say, want things to be done, you should actually kind of start with the why that we started. So we are actually kind of not actually kind of taking the wrong product or the wrong service to kind of really enable it with, I mean, what to say, DevOps, right? 2, right, I mean, we actually kind of know, right, I mean, what to say, what we are going to measure. So we have actually kind of created a pipeline. Now actually kind of make it work, right? So first make the value flow. And I am using here the word value. I didn't use the word code, right? I didn't use the word product, right? I didn't use the word service. Because finally, right, I mean, if it is not going to be useful, or if it does not meet the light at the end of the road, right, it's not going to generate any value, right? So we will actually kind of look at it, right, I mean, I want to say more in detail related to that. And I told, right, I mean, notice it's going to go from left to right, right? Then now, I mean, what say, what fundamentally we will need to do? We will need to kind of also make something, right, from right to left, right? That's what the second way, close the loop, right? Create and shorten, right, I mean, what to say, amplified feedback loops. Thereby, right, you will be able to kind of really get a sense of pulse of what is actually happening that I need to kind of be carrying for. What is the thing that I will need to kind of be wary of, right? What are my pain points, right? What are my bottlenecks, right? I mean, how can I actually kind of streamline it further, right? Remember, right, I mean, what to say, one of our foundational principles is lean, right? Which means you should always be looking out for waste. Fair enough, right? So the third way, now you have a loop, it's closed. What do you need to do? You have a cycle, what you will start to do? Start to rinse and repeat, right? You need to kind of really go on a continuous curve, right? Evolve the loop, right? With continued experimentation in order to learn from the mistakes, right? And achieve mastery, right? Mistakes can be abolished, right? And actually kind of derive value from when we actually kind of have a learning from it, right? And when we actually kind of have a takeaway from it, which we implement through, right? So that's what actually kind of really leads us to the mastery. And you saw those elite performers, they are really there, right? They are really actually operating on the third way, right? Probably, I mean, what to say, they are operating at the highest maturity, right? I mean, capability levels, right? I mean, what to say, on the third way. Okay, so now let us actually kind of dig a bit deeper and actually add, right, more context and essence to it, because we have seen a lot of metrics, right, a lot of things to eat, right? We will need to kind of stack it up and actually give an order to kind of how to kind of eat it through, right? So create a delivery system. How are we going to do that, right? I mean, marry, right, I mean, what to say, value with, I mean, what to say, kind of what we do, right? And create a delivery pipeline out of it, right? That's a fundamental, right? And how are you going to kind of really make sure that, right, I mean, that is going to flow through, right? I mean, create visibility in your delivery. You saw the product dashboard, the one that actually has the product view. It gives you, right, the visibility in the way in which, right, that's actually kind of flowing through, right? It gives you the visibility regarding, right, where your bottlenecks are, where your value is not flowing, right? You can keep on checking in code, right, but it's not actually kind of crossing your dit or sit, right, and actually that is going to grow, right? Over a period of time, it will actually turn from green to red. You can visually see that, right? So something is actually kind of choking you. Something is choking, your actual, delivery cycle, right? You will be able to kind of really, kind of get a sense of it, right? You will be able to appreciate it, you will be able to acknowledge it, and you will be able to kind of start looking at, right, what should I do? What should I actually kind of really kind of do to untie this particular knot, right? Identifying throttle points in the value flow and applying theory of constraints, right? And I want to kind of add a minute to kind of really add, right, information regarding theory of constraints. This was actually written sometime in the 1960s, right? By, a great eminent, personality called, Goldratt, right? He wrote a book called Goal, right? Where, he explained about this for the manufacturing engineering. Right? The beauty is that actually that is working perfectly well for DevOps, right? And Jenakim actually talks about it a lot in both his Phoenix book as well as the DevOps handbook, right? And of course, right, there is a recent Accelerate book that actually came across, which was actually related in context to the DORA survey that you saw, right? Where actually they actually bridge the essence of it, right, to what we actually see over here, right? Applying theory of constraints, right? What is theory of constraints? Theory of constraints is that at any point of time, right, any system will actually have one primary bottleneck point which you will need to identify, one primary bottleneck point that you will need to identify and work on that bottleneck point, not before the bottleneck point, not after the bottleneck point, right? You work there, you work before, work will get piled at the bottleneck point. You work after, right, there will be starvation, right? So what you actually kind of do as an essence, right, of improvement should be, attacking the problem, right, the real problem and working on that particular problem, try to uncover that and actually kind of solve that across. Now what will happen? Your value will start to flow, right? Agreed? So that's how actually you will need to kind of really establish this, right, first level, right, the first way of, doing DevOps, right? And then you will actually be able to kind of start to think about, right, what should I do next, right? Where, your what next would be, creating a foundational maturity, establishing continuous feedback. What are you going to do? I am reaching the end of the road. Make sure that, right, you get learnings out of it, right? I am seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right? What did I do? How did I cross through the tunnel, right? How well did I do? How well actually I could have done, right? All these things, right, are actually kind of really feedbacks that will be actually kind of lying in the system, right, as you can actually kind of go, because it actually kind of always actually has a run rate and do a statistical coverage, right, of metrics for a 90-day window, right? And what you are going to do as part of that, you are going to make sure that, right, hey, did I measure all my, kind of, because you would have actually gone through all your throttling points. Tomorrow you should not actually create another throttling point. So you will actually be, looking at, right, hey, what can I actually add more, right, to kind of create visibility in the delivery of flow, right? I am here more talking about visibility, right? Any metric that you are actually going to add finally will result in, culmination of those top 4 lagging indicators that you saw over there. This process is to identify, am I actually having any other leading indicator which can solve my present, which can actually take care of my, tomorrow, so that I will not face the same thing that I faced yesterday tomorrow, right? And measure everything that gives feedback on what is delivered, right? The gentleman talked about logs. The gentleman talked about, right, wiring up your infrastructure monitoring, right? The gentleman talked about, right, what is actually happening within your system, right? Create visibility within the system and try to uncover every bit of information that will actually kind of make your life, right, easy and valuable, right? So that is actually, your second level of actually foundational maturity, right, where you are elevating yourself up, you are actually kind of really performing DevOps, right? And then the third part, right, I think beginning of my talk, right, I used the word nirvana, right? You can actually kind of apply that here, right? Learn and experiment and evolve continuously, Okay, so rely on dimensional metrics to create opportunities, to identify opportunities. I actually purposefully, when Hari was about to complete it, right, I came and actually kind of talked about indicators like WIP, right, and Hari covered about velocity and SEDU. Logically speaking, right, I mean, there is a relationship that always exists between the leading indicator WIP and the lagging indicators, which are live indicators, velocity and SEDU. Right? These three together actually has an impact on the higher level lagging indicator that we saw, right? I mean, what to say, which is actually your cycle time. See, these layers are actually kind of really, I mean, what to say, talking to each other. We will need to kind of really get that visibility, try to understand, right, and try to uncover all those bottlenecks, right, and make things flow through, right? I mean, having a positive impact on this one, right? So you will actually, I mean, these are your pedals, right? These leading indicators of your pedals, accelerators, right? I mean, what to say, clutches, right? I mean, what to say, of your vehicle metaphor that we actually kind of saw earlier, right? So you can't actually wait for, I mean, what to say, things to kind of appear before actually we actually try to kind of do something, right, about it, right? So we will need to kind of have, right, a hold on all these, I mean, leading indicators, right, as we actually, I mean, focus on the outcomes towards, I mean, lagging indicators, right? So they build upon it and actually deliver you value when you actually kind of finally, right, I mean, what to say, go and deliver something out across, right, and actually kind of record all these things, right, I mean, live, right, from the field, right? And then, right, I mean, most important thing, hypothesize and experiment these opportunities towards outcomes, right? A classic, right, I mean, what to say, recommended way is actually kind of using improvement kata, right? So this actually comes from, I mean, what to say, Toyota Production System, TPS, right? Again, I mean, what to say, gentlemen, right, and the top in the first session, right, I mean, what to say, did actually kind of mention about it and touch about it, right? And this one is actually going to kind of really do you wonders, right? And this is actually, I mean, what to say, the way in which, right, I mean, Toyota operates on a continuously evolutionary basis, right, where, right, I mean, they are actually beyond what has been recorded in lean. Because, I mean, the difference between, I mean, what to say, the normal lean that was actually established earlier, right, and what was actually followed in Toyota was actually this improvement kata, right? This always actually kind of gets combined with coaching kata to kind of make sure that, right, I mean, you actually have, right, a continuous dialogue, right? What was the direction in which we want to move, right? What actually kind of, what is the stage, where are we today? What is the bottleneck that we are seeing? How can we actually kind of really, I mean, what to say, kind of make a milestone that will enable us to kind of really approach and conquer this bottleneck, right? And rinse and repeat, right? I mean, what to say, that with hypothesis and experiments, right? So classic example here is, right, I mean, what to say, my WIP is actually 20, right? I mean, what to say, my velocity and SEDU, right, that I registered lagging historically has been around 50%. The first question that we should actually, I mean, start asking is, right, how can I actually play with my WIP, right, and making sure that, right, I mean, what to say, it actually kind of creates a positive term, right? So these kind of, right, I mean, experiments that we will need to kind of really do and continuously evolve through, right? And remember, this is a vicious cycle. We'll need to start somewhere, we'll need to begin, and this is actually going to go on a continuous loop, right? Here, I mean, what to say, DevOps is not going to be a destination, it's actually a journey forward, right? And the state of, I mean, what to say, DevOps DORA report, right, I mean, would have actually kind of clearly established you. Till yesterday, there were only high performing groups. Now you have elite performing groups, right? So this is actually, I mean, what to say, a journey that is going to go ahead and ahead and ahead, right? I mean, what to say, till, right, I mean, what to say, we get there, right? And when we will get there, right, nobody will know, right? And key takeaways to summarize. Measurement is a very key foundation of your DevOps journey, right? So be, I mean, what to say, kind of really serious about what you try to do with respect to, right, I mean, what to say, implementing and approaching, right, this with a clear and a clean and a concise, right, and a purposeful strategy, right? And purposefully, I mean, position it across, right? We talked, I mean, what to say about it, why we need to kind of really do this purposeful positioning, right? Adopt open source tooling, right? Create an internal community, right? For, I mean, what to say, driving this measurement strategy, right? So we can go on a vicious cycle, right? DevOps 3 ways. Define, I mean, what to say, the clarity to what you can do about it, right? And DevOps is evolutionary, right? Be ready for continuous improvement journey, right? And be, I mean, successful with your outcomes towards, I mean, what to say, DevOps, right? And increase the state of DevOps maturity curve further, right? With that, thank you.
Yeah, how easy is it to customize Hygia to add more metrics? Do we need to do coding, or is it we can add it using GUI?
You want to take it?
So these are the built-in systems, or
yeah, these are already built into Hygia.
Yeah.
These systems are already built into Hygia.
These are
right?
which provide the information, right? These are the collectors.
Yeah, these
The
are the
on-
collectors
on
that
the-
we actually have at this point as we talk. And this list is growing right month over month.
But I think the analysis happens after these collectors.
Yes, analysis, yeah, so the metrics gets published after these collectors, and these are the metrics, right? I mean, notice these are the higher level, right?
Yeah, so
repository
if I
of-
want to add another key measure,
Yeah, if
which
you want
I
to
want-
add another metric,
do I need to go into the code, or is it possible to do too much coding?
if actually, I mean, the data is already available, right, within Hygia through any of these collectors, right? You
Yeah,
will
data
need
is
to kind of write a metrics publisher, metrics processor, right? That's a code that you will need to write at this point, right? That's actually part of your metrics publishing engine,
So
right?
Yeah.
Widget is actually kind of quite clean, right? I mean, notice this widget, right? I mean, notice is actually an Angular code that you can reuse. All you will need to do is, right, you will need to do some small amount of coding, which we are trying to kind of make it configurable, right, as we
Yeah,
talk.
that's what my vision.
To make sure that, right, we just actually give, right, and since it is a JSON, right, formatted document that is living
for
in
example,
MongoDB.
like your 185, like the 7th trend indicator for timestamp, it
Yeah.
says 90 minutes, 90 days. Is 90 days hard coded, or is it a customization thing within the widget?
Today it's actually hard coded, right? I mean, we are actually kind of making the widget configuration as well as, right, the computation, right, configurable as we talk.
Yeah, because
this was
for
a
example,
request.
it will depend on my product. Is it 90 days or is it 90 minutes, or what trend I want to see?
Yeah, so I would actually take an advice. This is for executives. So
Yes, that's why actually I want to say,
yeah,
because
if you
executives
actually
will
want it
not-
live, if you want it live, I mean, this will show you, I mean, what to say, many of those indicators live.
No, executives know the business logic, so they would like to tweak. Okay, I don't want to see it on a 90-day period. I want to see it on a 45-day period, and they don't know coding, right?
Yeah,
So
got
that's
you.
what I was trying to ask.
Thank you. Yeah, we actually already had the request, right, and it is actually kind of in works, right, of making it configurable.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on DevOps future. Like after 5 years, where do you see the future of DevOps? So since we are going towards full stack development model and zero downtime, so does it mean that we are not going to achieve zero downtime, or like what's your view on that?
Okay, so I actually kind of closed it with a thing, right? I mean, see, DevOps, the name that we gave is just actually kind of recently. But many of the organizations have been doing these common sense things, right? I mean, I would say for quite long time. So don't see DevOps from a tool perspective. If your question is towards, I mean, I would say, hey, I'm learning Jenkins today, tomorrow Jenkins will be there or not? That's actually, I mean, I would say a question, right? I mean, I would say that will fit the bill that you actually asked for. Tools may actually kind of come and go, right? I mean, I would say the way of actually kind of working, right, will evolve. A classic example is right now DevOps is being extended, right? I mean, I would say you would have actually heard about terminology called, right, site reliability engineering, SRE, right? So SRE is actually an extended application of DevOps. Without actually DevOps, right, SRE will never work. Because SRE talks about SLA, SLA, SLOs, right, of your service level, not your application level. Here we are talking about application uptime, downtimes. There it is about service degradation, right? If I get a 404, right? If I get a 300, if I get a 500, 505, right? I mean, I will actually, I mean, have indicators, right? I mean, that will actually pull me down, right, in the SRE world. Unless otherwise you attain that nirvana stage, get closer to that nirvana stage, right? SRE is actually, I mean, is going to be, right, like a mirage, right, for people, right? I mean, down the curve.